Hey guys, Christian here, and in this video I'd like to show you how to easily and safely upgrade to the new version 2 of Uptime Kuma, the free open source and easy to use self-hosted monitoring tool. That's probably one of my most favorite home lab apps and services because I'm using it to monitor any of my critical infrastructure and services, get detailed statistics about up and down times, or also get notified about system outages on my Discord server. This is really a great app, and the new version 2 gives us some cool new features, like instead of being limited to the SQLite database, we can now add a real MariaDB database backend for better performance and better scalability of this application, as well as some new notification providers, also Docker secret support for all the guys who love Docker Swarm, and many more small improvements to this app. But it also introduced some breaking changes that you definitely should be aware of, so I thought let's make a quick video about it, even though the first beta versions of Uptime Kuma version 2 were already released in October last year. So yeah, I know I'm a little late with the video. By the way, I'm also uploading all of the commands and instructions we are covering in this video to my new website, christianlemper.de, so you don't have to type all the backup commands while watching the video. Check it out, link is in the description. And before we start, I quickly want to show you a new tool that helps you managing all your projects and tasks, the sponsor of today's video, called Dart AI. Dart AI is a truly AI native project management tool, meaning AI isn't just bolted on as an extra feature, it's built into how the whole thing works. And it's super easy and intuitive to use. You just organize your work in project spaces where you can create task lists, so-called dartboards, and set things like priorities, sizes, assignments, due dates, and so on. And you can also create markdown-based documentation files directly inside Dart to keep everything in one place. I really love this. And what certainly stands out in Dart is that it integrates with so many tools that you might be already using, such as your calendar, email, Slack, Discord, GitHub, and Notion, but also AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, MCP, and even N8N, so everything stays connected in one central place. But by far the coolest feature are AI skills, because they let you turn repeatable AI prompts into one-click solutions, and you can use that throughout your entire team. Think about prompts for planning projects or researching technical topics, writing change logs, or generating proof of concept task lists. And whenever you need a new one, you just open the AI chat, type add, pick the skill, and Dart takes care of all the rest. So I personally think Dart AI is a super useful tool, and if you want to try it out, as always, link is in the description. Alright guys, so now let's get started and let's upgrade one of my Uptime Kuma testing instances that still runs on the old version 1 to the new version 2. Again, before we do anything, we should take a look at the migration guide, which actually mentions multiple times back up your data directory. This is super important. And if you're using a persistent Docker volume, if you're using my Docker Compose templates, you of course need to take a backup from the directory inside the container's file system. So this is the first thing that I'm showing you how to properly do this. There are also some breaking changes described in this migration guide. Double check if you're affected by any of these, but yeah, for most home lab installations, you probably should not be worried about it. And then there are also some Docker-only breaking changes that are important for anybody using or following my tutorial videos. One thing is that they dropped the support for Alpine-based Docker images. Honestly, I'm not using them in my templates, even though Alpine is a great Linux distro for small and efficient Docker images. But I've already got many problems with these Alpine-based images in other applications like Postgres, for example, or also Nginx. So yeah, I know these images take less space on the disk, but they don't always include all the right tools and the dependencies that might be needed for certain features, and therefore I think the decision was to drop the support for these images. Also, there are some new tags introduced, like the version 2 or slim and rootless tags. So you definitely should take a look at this file here as well. So the Docker tags here is described what these slim and rootless tags all mean. So they're usually smaller image sizes, but they are also missing a few important features. Again, I'm personally personally not a big friend of these, so when you're using my Docker Compose templates, we will just use the normal full version of the version 2. One thing that is really important if you're using a latest Docker tech. Honestly, guys, I've said that so many times in all of my video tutorials. It is never a good idea to use the latest tech, because if you're using the latest tech, you actually never really know what version you are using and pulling down. Therefore, the developers also made the decision to deprecate the latest tech completely. So the latest tech will not be upgraded in Uptime Kuma anymore. You have to specifically set it from latest or version 1 to the version 2, otherwise you won't get this upgrade. Also, when we return once more to the migration guide, there's another important thing to be aware of. If you specifically want to migrate existing Uptime Kuma installations from SQLite to MariaDB, this is not fully supported, at least by the developers, because you need to export the data from the old SQLite database, then convert this into the MariaDB SQL dialect using third-party tools such as SQLite to MySQL, and then import this into the database server. Don't worry, we are doing this together in this video because I think that might be useful. But if you just have a very small home lab that you are monitoring, you probably can just continue using SQLite. There's nothing wrong with this. I've also upgraded my boilerplates repository to include a new compose file of Uptime Kuma in the version 2 that also supports MariaDB or SQLite. You can choose based on the variables. By the way, if you are completely new, you don't know my boilerplates repository, I link you the video tutorial for this in the description box down below. It's also great that makes the deployment of all these compose files or automating certain templates and tasks much easier for you. By the way, for all the people in my community, I'm also working on a new version 3 of boilerplates. I'm not going to introduce any details in this video, but just as a heads up, there's something big coming in the next month, which I'm currently hardly working on, so stay tuned and keep an eye on the Discord server. But yeah, let's get started with the migration. I think we've covered all of the important things you should be aware of. So I'm running a test installation of Uptime Kuma in the version 1. These are all the monitors that I'm currently running. And this is the directory where we have a simple compose file running the version 1. You could also run the latest tag. That wouldn't make any difference at all. And now let's together upgrade this to the new version 2. So again, the very first thing that we should do is take a backup of that volume. Otherwise, we might lose all of the monitors configuration, the admin users, all of the historical data and the metrics. That would not be great. So first of all, let's run a Docker Compose down, of course, without the volumes, and remove orphans. That would delete the persistent volume data. If we execute a Docker volume ls, you can see there is my Uptime Kuma Docker volume that contains all of the important data. And to backup this, I'm always using a small and simple busybox Docker image with a simple tarball command that will copy all of the data from within the Docker volume and package this in a tarball archive. If we execute this, it will start a small container, copy all of the data, and then we should see a backup from the version 1 database. You could also take a look at this if we create a new directory and execute a tar xfz backup v1. Then if we execute an ls backup v1, you can see all of the files that are inside this tarball archive that we could use to restore the kuma.db. So this is the SQLite database that contains all of the important data. It is important to take one backup of the version 1 database, then start the automated migration and take a new backup of version 2 again. Now let's do this. To start the migration, you simply just need to update the Uptime Kuma image to the version 2. This is recommended. This will just use the latest version 2 of Uptime Kuma. Or if you want to pick a specific release here, for example, the version 2.1.3 is released 2 weeks ago. So then you can also use that as a pinned tagged version and then do all of the minor upgrades manually as well if you want. And yeah, before we change anything inside the compose file, let's just run this Docker Compose. One thing to notice, if the migration starts, you should see this in the logs. Migrating aggregate table. And this can take quite a long time. No, in this case, it just took a few seconds because this is just a fresh and simple test instance. But I can tell you from my own experience, I've done the migration on my production Uptime Kuma instance. This took about like 6 or 7 minutes. So if you got a large database, this is also mentioned in the migration guide, be patient. Don't be worried if the new version 2 container doesn't immediately come up. Just take a look at the log files. There you should see a percentage of the total migration process, and then you can see when it's done or if there are any errors during the migration. You should also not stop the container while it's migrating, otherwise the database is damaged and you will certainly need to restore from the backup and start over. So this is important. You can also see the new version 2 picks the database type SQLite because we haven't reconfigured this. And yeah, if you're using a small instance, again, it is totally fine. So if you're one of the small home lab users and you don't care about MariaDB, you can probably just stop the video right now and then you're done. But if you're interested in how to actually switch or convert the SQLite database to MariaDB, then keep watching. I'm going to show that right now because it's actually not that difficult, to be honest. Just know that it is not officially supported by the maintainers of Uptime Kuma. First of all, let's create a new backup of the version 2. So we are using the same container, but I'm just going to create a new tarball. So there it is. And I'm also going to extract this into the backup v2 directory because we need that later. So here you can see this is the upgraded kuma.db. And now we can modify some of the environment variables inside the Uptime Kuma container. If you want to know how that works, you can just go to the Uptime Kuma repository and then go to the wiki. There is a section called environment variables. This tells you everything how to configure the database type. So here, for example, the database type can be switched from SQLite to MariaDB. Then you need to enter the host name if you are using an external database, the port, the name, username, password. By the way, if you're interested in Docker Swarm, this is not part of this tutorial video, but if you might be interested in it, you could also use these environment variables to load the credentials from a Docker secret. You probably should know this if you've watched my Docker Swarm tutorial, but for now, we are using a simple standalone Docker Compose project, so we don't have to mess around with that. But we certainly need to add these environment variables, and we also need a database server. Let me for a second open the template here that I have created. So here in this template, you can see I've added some variables depending on what you configure using my CLI tool. It will set the environment variables. It will also auto-generate a secure password that is stored in a .env file, and that project you could then upload to your Docker server and you're ready to go. You could also set traffic labels for reverse proxy if you're interested in this. And if you don't select an external database, it would also spin up a new MariaDB container with the configured variables, a persistent Docker volume for this. Just go to my GitHub repository boilerplates, download the CLI tool. Make sure to always do a repo update. This will download the latest versions of the templates to your local machine. And then you can use the boilerplates compose list command to get a list of all the published templates that I have created on my Git repository library. So here's the one for Uptime Kuma. So if we show the details of this template, you can see these are all of the variables that you can configure. By default, it's not enabling traffic. It's not enabling any database server. It's using SQLite. But if you want to customize this, you can just use the compose generate command. With a -o, you can also specify the directory where it should write that to. I'm just specifying the current directory. First of all, I should rename my existing compose file to old.compose. And then if we hit enter, you can customize any of the settings. For example, the service name, which is a required variable by default set to Uptime Kuma, could use a different name. But for most of these variables, I'm fine with the default arguments here, unless stopped is also fine. The port, I don't want to use traffic for this example, so we can just skip traffic and traffic TLS. But here, the database type, this is now important because here I want to switch from SQLite, the default, to MariaDB. So that enables all of the other variables here. First of all, you could just connect to an external database server if you got that running in your home lab. In my case, I'm saying no because I want to use another container in the same Docker Compose project. The database name can be Uptime Kuma. That's fine. The user as well. The password, you can now type in a secure and strong password you want to use, or just hit enter to auto-generate this with the boilerplate SQLite tool. Also, the database port is fine. And there's no a warning because the current directory is not empty, so it would overwrite any compose file in this project, but that's fine, so I'm going to say yes. So boilerplate was generated successfully, and then we have a compose file that contains all of the important configuration variables that we need to run Uptime Kuma in the new version 2. All right, so one thing that I need to change for the migration is I need to expose the port of the database because we want to use the SQLite 3.2 MySQL conversion tool running on my local machine, and that need to connect to the database server to inject the SQLite database. This tool can be installed via Homebrew on macOS. So if you're a Mac user, it's super easy. Just enter brew install SQLite 3.2 MySQL, and then you can use the tool in your terminal. So that's what we're doing. Of course, we first of all need to start the project. So I don't want to start Uptime Kuma yet. I only want to start the database containers. So I'm just entering Docker Compose up-d, specifying the name of the database containers. Then it's only starting that container and only creating the volume for this. And then we can use the SQLite 3 MySQL tool to convert the kuma.db file inside my backup version 2 directory. And I also need to replace the password with the real password that was generated from my boilerplates tool. And let's hit enter. So then it's doing its magic. It probably will take longer the bigger the database is, so just wait until it's finished. All right, so now the database server got all of the data from my testing instance. You can see this is of course not active because it's not running, but we should have correctly imported all of the important data. So what we need to do now is we could now start the container and it would work, but I want to demonstrate how that would work if you're completely deleting the volume of Uptime Kuma. So make sure to not delete the database, but you can safely delete the data volume. So let's just hit Docker Compose up-d and hope that everything works correctly. So if you have done the migration and the conversion of SQLite correctly, you should have all your data, all the monitors, and even the historical data restored correctly and moved to the MariaDB database backend. Again, if you're running into any trouble, you could still just shut down the project, delete all the volumes, copy the data from the backup directory back into the containers file system. That would be the disaster recovery if anything goes wrong. You might be wondering, why the heck did we do all of this? Well, the main reason for moving to a true MariaDB database backend is that it is better for performance and scalability, especially if you're using Docker Swarm and you want to have some form of redundancy, like if you want to move the application container to different nodes during updates or anything. And you have your central database server as a backend. It doesn't really matter where you are starting the container. You don't need any Docker volumes at all. That is, of course, much, much better. And yeah, so that's basically everything you have to know. And I hope this video helped you to be aware of all of the important things about the new upgrade. So thanks everybody for watching. Have a nice day. Thanks so much to all the supporters and members of my YouTube channel. You guys are really amazing. And of course, I'm gonna catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.